Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 most controversial Prime Ministers. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're looking at the 10 most contentious PMs the UK has ever had. And yes, most of them are Tories, but that's because the Tories have had the most Prime Ministers by a huge margin. Let us know in the comments who your least favourite PM is. Number 10, Liz Truss. It's perhaps a bit of a stretch to call Liz Truss controversial, as the country seemed almost unanimously united against her, save for around 10% of the public who told pollsters they thought she did a good job, somehow. But what's more outrageous is that, in this day and age, someone can still end up in Downing Street even if they weren't put there by the British public during a general election. Truss's lightning-quick 45 days from forming a government to resigning in disgrace will go down in history. Even more so when you consider that for 10 of those days, the government was shut down for the Queen's funeral. It's remarkable she did so much damage so quickly. Number 9, David Lloyd George. A radical liberal and the first Welsh Prime Minister, Lloyd George took the office in 1916, 2 years into the First World War. But despite being a popular figure for leading Britain out of the war, Lloyd George was no stranger to controversy. In 1913, he found himself the target of the suffragettes' bombing campaign when they tried to blow up his house, though nobody was injured, and also sent him a slew of letter bombs. But after the war, Lloyd George was forced to resign when the Tories decided they were sick of being in coalition with the Liberals. The coalition ended, and he was forced to resign. Number 8, Edward Heath. To his credit, Heath did manage to serve his entire term in Downing Street without a dramatic resignation, unlike the majority of ministers it seems. Heath defeated Labour incumbent Harold Wilson in 1970, ostensibly to usher in a new era of economic policy. Except he didn't deliver on any of his manifesto, instead backsliding on nearly everything he promised to the public and his party. His manifesto pledges would later be taken on board by the Tories in the following decade, headed by Thatcher, though Heath apparently didn't like somebody actually doing the things he said he'd do 10 years prior and was a harsh critic of Thatcher's Britain. Number 7, Anthony Eden. Churchill's right-hand man and a crucial figure for Britain during the war years. Eden had everything going for him, until he didn't. Following a series of botched operations, Eden found himself prescribed a bevy of substances that are today very controlled, if not illegal. Eden's judgment was massively impaired by his daily illicit cocktails, to the extent that his irrational hatred of Egypt's president, Nasser, pulled Britain and France into the Suez Crisis in 1956. The Suez Crisis was such a disaster, especially coming from a former foreign secretary, and Eden resigned just weeks after it ended. He was Prime Minister for less than 2 years. Number 6, Harold Wilson. Strange rumours plagued Harold Wilson during his time as Prime Minister. Wilson himself apparently believed that MI5 was conspiring against him, saying so publicly in 1977 after he'd regained the premiership from Ted Heath. There seems to be minimal evidence that a conspiracy existed, though rumours about Wilson supposedly being a spy for the Soviet Union did. Regardless, these stories circulated even while Wilson was still in power, not helped by the Crown now bringing the idea of Wilson being a spy back to the public consciousness. Wilson wasn't a spy, though MI5 did investigate this when he won the 1964 election, as the Cold War was still ongoing. Number 5, Boris Johnson. Where to even begin? Johnson was never a stranger to controversy, getting in trouble for using offensive language of all varieties, even during his early journalistic career. As PM, however, everything multiplied. Not only did the UK have the worst COVID death rate in Europe, despite an effective vaccine rollout, but Boris was eventually brought down by myriad personal crises, like the infamous Partygate, where it was found government officials had had numerous parties in Whitehall during lockdown, including one on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. when a record-breaking 57 ministers resigned from his government in July 2022, he was forced out. Number 4. Alec Douglas Hume. The sovereign really isn't supposed to get involved in the workings of Westminster, beyond inviting the democratically elected Prime Minister to form a government in their name. However, the late Queen broke this cardinal rule in late 1963, when she appointed Lord Hume as PM following the resignation of Macmillan. The problem was that, while the monarch always appoints the Prime Minister, not only had Douglas Hume not won an election, but he also wasn't the natural choice of successor. That, combined with the fact that the royal family were close friends of his, meant that Hume's tenure in Downing Street lasted just 12 months. Number 3. Tony Blair. He won a historic landslide against John Major in 1997, but Blair's New Labour has a spotty legacy, to say the least. Undoubtedly, the biggest controversy to come from Blair's premiership was the war in Iraq, deemed to be completely illegal by the UN in 2004. When Blair was given a knighthood in 2022, tradition for former PMs, he was widely branded a war criminal by the British left, but he had other dodgy policies, including introducing tuition fees and refusing to renationalise Britain's railways, the latter of which remains popular among the public even today. But it's still his entry into numerous foreign wars, often with the disapproval of Parliament, that rule his reputation. Number 2. Neville Chamberlain. It's easy today to look back on Chamberlain's time as Prime Minister and point at the myriad mistakes he made with regards to Hitler, though some argue it's not as clean-cut as you may believe. On the one hand, it's true that the Allies' failure to act in the 1930s emboldened Hitler, as did Chamberlain's much criticised policy of appeasement, which saw him make many more concessions to the Führer. But it's also been argued that the appeasement was needed to buy time for Britain to rearm, not to mention that at the time, the British public was against going to war with Germany again. Was Chamberlain a coward, or was he thinking much further ahead? You be the judge. Number 1. Margaret Thatcher. The right loves her, the left hates her. There's never been a more divisive or contentious figure in British politics as the Iron Lady. Becoming the first female Prime Minister in 1979, Thatcher ruled the UK for the entirety of the 1980s. Her critics say she brought massive unemployment, further unrest in Northern Ireland, privatised the railways, and devastated Britain's trade unions. His supporters, on the other hand, say that the unions had too much power, that she was victorious in the Falklands, and that her neoliberal economic policies were, in the long term, prosperous and successful. When she died in 2013, her funeral was accompanied by street parties, and public monuments to her are repeatedly vandalized. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.